The federal minimum wage is a hot topic in today's political and economic world. With a huge presidential debate coming up, with incredible amounts of United States debt, the federal minimum wage is always on the debate topics. Now, states like California or major cities such as Seattle have already preempted this change, increasing their minimum wage to $15 an hour. These cities and states allow us to get a look in of how this would affect the entire country if we were to go that route. Now, the federal minimum wage began as part of the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938. Originally, the federal minimum wage was 25 cents, or about $4.18 today. As you can tell, the federal minimum wage was certainly not a means to an end, but rather a means to a beginning. Mike Patton of Forbes magazine has explored and discovered that women are more likely to be paid minimum wage than men, and the most likely age group to get paid minimum wage is, as you would expect, about 16 to 19. Now, one could assume that women being paid less would be an EEOC adverse impact case, as it is a discrimination against a protected class. But we haven't had any cases to this point. Now, what's so great about the minimum wage? In a laissez-faire economy, your skills determine your wage. If you have a better skill, you deserve to be paid more. Well, people have decided that you should be able to live off your federal minimum wage. You should be able to live off flipping burgers, even at a McDonald's. Well, Mike McGraw from the Human Resource Executive has explained that larger companies such as McDonald's or Burger King, they would be able to be okay with a $15 minimum wage. They would be all right fiscally. But a small mom and pop sole proprietorship, we'd see a lot of those going out of business very, very quickly. Now, the best way to articulate the change in the federal minimum wage and in our economy would be to use a few numbers. So if we were to increase our $7.45 minimum wage to $15 an hour, that would be over a 200% increase, or double. Now, out of the 158 million workers in America, about 47% make an hourly wage, and only 4.7% of that 74.5 million people earning an hourly salary are making minimum wage, which equates not to very much. Now, if you were to increase those people's minimum wage to $15, that would increase spending by just under 28 million. Now, how much would that affect our economy? Well, it would only increase our gross domestic product by 1.25%. Very, very small percentages. So we need to really consider if this is really going to help our country. Now, Mark Wheeler of the Harvard Business School has examined quite a few companies that have made the change and increased their minimum wage. The first one that he introduces is the Seattle firm Gravity Payments, which is a credit card processing company out of Seattle, Washington. Now, a lot of people said, well, this is a great initiative. They were the first company to do so, but it actually kind of backfired for them. Many of the company's larger clients decided that they didn't want to work with the company anymore. They didn't agree with paying their employees so much. And they didn't want to be lumped in and say, well, why aren't you paying that? But more importantly, high-level executives decided to leave the company because they weren't getting the incremental increase that the other lower-level employees were getting. Now, Wheeler also studied another company, or restaurant rather, in Seattle called Ivar Salmon House, who increased their minimum wage to $15 an hour. By doing so, they had to increase their menu items an average of 21%. So every dollar for every $5. Quite a big number, especially over just in a restaurant. If you were to increase that over a course of an entire economy, it could be detrimental. Now, a more local example is a company called Moo Cluck Moo. Moo Cluck Moo's is a quick service restaurant in Dearborn Heights, Michigan. They increased their minimum wage to $15 an hour as well. Originally, they had 4 people working the floor at a time for an average or a minimum of $60 an hour for their employees before the benefits. Now, over time, the company has found that they can't sustain that, and they've dropped their workforce to just 2 people at a time and increased a mechanical or computerized presence. Now, another idea that we can look towards to see how federally increased minimum wage would affect us is our Obamacare, or our national health care. Now, Obamacare is enforced to all full-time employees. It's a burden on the employer. So the employer, to combat this, has increased the part-time employees that they have on hand. But even in our economy coming back to a more healthy, stable economy after the recession, it's really shown that to combat this, the part-time employees have increased exponentially. But the full-time employees, they're not seeing much of a growth. And this is a way to get around paying their employees benefit packages such as our healthcare. Now, in conclusion, there's a very bleak outlook for our federal minimum wage. We see that a lot of companies have to increase their prices so much that the inflation as a result from the increased minimum wage would be detrimental to our economy. With the case of Ivar Salmon House, we see a 21% increase in products. If we were to see that across the board for all of our economy, a simple Coca-Cola would be $3 or $4 at a point. Just those kind of ideas and concepts really are an issue, because how it would affect our company or our GDP very, very little, only 1.25%. With such a little increase in our society, we should really stick with the laissez-faire free market economy approach and say, you need to go to school, you need to have something marketable so that we can have a more competitive workforce, not as much a clumped and very similar workforce where a lot of people are making just the same amount of money but far less purchasing power as a result.